So the nitrogen cycle is the only cycle of all the cycles we're going to do that has names for each part. Well, carbon has photosynthesis and respiration, let's say, okay? Other than that, there are a lot. It's simple. It's simple. It travels through the layers. This one you're going to know. Names of cycles, and for each name, the reactant and the product, and where it happens, and who is responsible for that process, or what organism, I should say, not who. Okay, and remember, it's not always a perfect cycle. There's, there could be jumps. So we're going to try to get through it as best we can, and then I'm going to end with kind of piecing it all together, hopefully. A lot of this is a struggle, and you have to figure out how to make it work for you, okay? So we're going to start with atmospheric nitrogen. Why do you think I'm starting there?
Because in the atmosphere.
Why though? Because there's a lot of nitrogen. How much of a lot? 78% of our atmosphere is nitrogen. So I'm going to start where there's a lot of nitrogen. Here's the interesting part. This nitrogen gas that's in our atmosphere is unusable to all organisms except 2. So there's only 2 organisms that can actually use nitrogen gas, which is most abundant in our atmosphere. And that's a good thing because we need nitrogen gas. It's one of our PS. So it's one of the elements that make up organic compounds, right? Which we're going to talk about in a minute. So in this process, which is called nitrogen fixation, nitrogen is getting fixed into a usable form. Let's try to make that sentence in our head. Nitrogen fixation is taking unusable nitrogen gas and fixing it into usable form. What is the compound that's going to be? So nitrogen gas goes into an organism and it gets released as what? Look at the molecules on the page. What is that?
NH.
NH what? How many H's?
4.
What's NH for?
Ammonium.
Good job. Ammonia or ammonium. Here's where it starts to get a little weird because we don't need to know balance equations. And if you want to balance it, by all means, go ahead and figure out what the balance equation is. I don't require it. You're going to say nitrogen gas is turned into ammonia. Or N2 is turned into NH4, whatever you want to call it. Ammonia or ammonia is fine. This is done by 2 different types of bacteria. Cyanobacteria, which is in the oceans. So nitrogen gas from the atmosphere will enter this bacteria and be converted to ammonia. Or in the geosphere, there's a plant called rhizobium, which is there's a plant called legume plants, and in the roots of those plants is a bacteria called rhizobium. So let me repeat that. Plant is called legume plants. In the roots of those plants is a bacteria. That's a symbiotic relationship they have. And they will turn the nitrogen gas into ammonia on land, let's say. Also, lightning, you see this lightning bolt that I put here? Can convert nitrogen gas into ammonia. That process is called lightning fixation. So try to remember that word fixation or fix, because that's what's happening. It's fixing unusable nitrogen. Remember that this starting point I chose because 78% of the atmosphere is nitrogen. But I could always start with nitrogen in the soil and I wouldn't be able to start with nitrogen fixation. So don't learn it as an order of nitrogen fixation is first. Nitrogen fixation is first if we're starting with the compound nitrogen gas and we're in the atmosphere. If we're in the soil, we're already ammonia, right? Which was made. Ammonia is going to get converted into what? Look at the picture.
Bacteria. No.
By bacteria, good. So bacteria is going to convert ammonia into what? Nitrates or nitrites, we're going to say. Nitrates or nitrites. Now, these nitrates or nitrites can go through 2 different parts of the cycle. One is called assimilation and one is called denitrification. I'm going to start with assimilation, okay? Assimilation, what is going to do the job? Plants finally come into play as usual because first it's usually plants that get the stuff. They're going to take the nitrates and they're going to turn it into what? What are these things? DNA, RNA, what else? I heard it. Proteins. We're going to call those nitrogen-rich organic compounds, yes? What we learned in bio, organic compounds like amino acids, well, protein is the organic compound, and DNA or nucleic acids, they're nitrogen-rich compounds that we need, right? And then once the plants have the nitrogen-rich organic compounds, like in other cycles, we're going to obtain those nitrogen-rich compounds by eating the plants or eating an organism that eats the plants, right? So we're going to get them that way. Now, in your notes, the next page is the other step nitrates can go through. Let's just finish the cycle and go here. So we're starting with the nitrogen-rich organic compounds. If you want to flip the pages, go ahead. I'm just going to complete that cycle, and then I'll go back, okay? So the nitrogen-rich organic compounds are in us, in plants, in all organisms that fed off the plants. What happens after the food chain in all the cycles we've learned? Once you have the nitrogen, how does it go back into the cycle? Waste. So you want to put here, waste is excreted or eliminated in some capacity. And once that happens, what happens next? What are these things?
Organisms.
What kind? Decomposers are going to break down this nitrogen-rich compounds. And what are they going to make? Look at the picture. No, these are my DNA. So decomposers break down the nitrogen-rich compounds into what?
Ammonia.
Good job. Same compound, ammonia or ammonium, NH4. Look at the name, ammonification. We're making ammonia, okay? What do you think is going to happen to the ammonia? It's going to go, where's it going, people?
In the atmosphere.
No.
Into the ground.
It's in the soil. And what happens to ammonia in the soil? It turns into nitrates, a process called
Nitrification.
So know that the ammonia can go right back into the cycle now, right? Because at some point, the cycle has to go back. Decomposers always put things back into the cycle. Now, another thing that can happen is our nitrates. So I'm going to go back here and remind you that when I made nitrates, I told you two things can happen. Assimilation, which would then lead to the food chain, which would then lead to ammonification, or denitrification. So I'm going to go there. So in denitrification, the nitrates are going to be converted into what? Look at the diagram.
Organic matter.
Nope.
No, just kidding.
Look at the diagram. Nitrates are converted into nitrogen gas. Think of that as denitrifying the nitrogen because it's going back into the atmosphere where it can't be used by anything except two organisms. Yes? And once nitrogen gas is back into the atmosphere, what's going to happen? What part? Fixation, where nitrogen will get fixed. Who does that? Lightning, or, of course, on your test it's going to say, other than lightning, how does nitrogen get? Good. All right, we're going to review the whole cycle in what I call my version of a good explanation of the whole cycle. Does that look like a good explanation to you? Maybe not. It works for me. If it doesn't work for you, create one, because you're going to need one in your mind, some form of this, okay? So I'm going to stick to the same plan. I'm going to start with nitrogen gas. What happens to nitrogen gas?
Nitrogen fixation.
Good. It gets fixed into usable forms, right? When nitrogen gas undergoes nitrogen fixation, what's made? Ammonia or ammonium, yes? Who does this?
Lightning, cyanobacteria, or rhizobium.
Perfect. Lightning, no plants. Lightning or bacteria. But in this particular step, you have to name the specific bacteria. Cyanobacteria in the water and rhizobium, which is found in legume plants. Okay? So now we have nitrates. If you want the arrow to come right over here, you could do that too. Like, make sure you understand that now. Oh, well, ammonia was right here. That's why I put it there. This is going to start another process, yes? What's this process called? Nitrification. What happens to ammonia during nitrification? It turns into nitrates or nitrites. Who does this? We don't have plants yet. Just bacteria. Because decomposers are going to return it to the cycle. And if you notice, we're just continuing through the cycle right now. Yes? More converting. Where does this happen? In the soil. Add that. And the soil is part of what layer of earth? Geosphere. Good. Think of all those things, okay? Now we'll go this way. Yes? And I don't tell you what this is, but knowing that I'm going to come back up here, you should know what this process is called. So what is it? Good job. How do you know it's denitrification? It's going back to nitrogen gas. Good job. It is the conversion of nitrates into nitrogen gas, which is going back into the atmosphere. Who does this? Not where, who?
Yeah.
Bacteria.
Okay, bacteria.
Denitrifying. Remember, they're the type of bacteria that are going to make nitrogen no longer usable except to two organisms, right? So now we've got, and we could extend this arrow over here. We've got our nitrates and nitrites, right? Can go another direction. What is this process called? Assimilation. Who does it?
The
Plants. And what do they convert nitrates into? Good. Nitrogen-rich organic compounds. Put the word plants there because I left it out. Then what happens? I did put plants. Sorry. Plants do this. And then what happens? What always happens after plants take in the organic compounds?
the gas, right? No.
What? Before, that could happen, yes, if the plant dies. But if the plant dies, decomposers are going to return it. If the plant doesn't die, how do we get it? We consume. The food chain begins. Then we're going to have waste or death. You probably should add that statement there. Always. Something has to happen to the plant. It dies, or the organism dies, or there's excretion of waste. And then what process ends this cycle? Where nitrogen-rich organic compounds get converted back to what? Ammonia. What's that process called? That's the easy one. Ammonification. Good. And that is done by decomposers. And that is the end of the nitrogen cycle.
Hold on.
The nightmare cycle.